This is the video about Rob and Julia's 2021 French vacation. Early the next morning, we got up and went for a walk in the Bekijnhof, which is still the site of a religious order. It was where widows and spinsters, unmarried women, could find refuge and safety in a large city, and they lived as casual sisters within the religious order, worshiping regularly in the church and following the basic rules of the order. We explored the church and the grounds quietly. It was pretty much an oasis of peace in the middle of Bruges. And then we went back out onto the street and found ourselves a canal tour. All the canal tours in Bruges are exactly the same. The city regulates them. They're about a half an hour long. And it's not a very extensive tour because there's a lot of dead ends because canals have been filled in and roads have been added. But it was a neat way to see the city from the water. It looks entirely different from down there. And then we were off to our next stop, the city of Honfleur, an old city on the English Channel at the mouth of the Seine. It's got a lovely center city that's quite old, 12th, 13th, 14th century and older. The fortifications have all been removed. That was done in the late 19th century. So the port looks much more open and certainly much less fortified. Our hotel was outside of the city center by about a kilometer. It came with a black cat and a next-door neighbor who had a dovecote, which ensured that mornings and evenings his rooftop was covered with a clattering crowd of pigeons. We wandered around the town that evening a bit. It was a little on the spooky side, all those old buildings and very pale lighting. In addition to this old bell tower, you can see on the roof there some lovely cutouts of cats that amused me. It looked a lot different in the full light of day, much more cheerful, much less haunted. We spent the morning exploring the city. Here's the Calvados, which is the local liquor distilled from apples, which are everywhere in Normandy. And of course, that evening we had to have the obligatory, well, Rob did anyway, mussels. I opted for pizza. Found ourselves a nice cafe and sat down to watch the world go by and encountered the first of many heartbreaks. Yes, the wrong glass for the beer. This happened over and over and over again the moment that we set foot in France. And it was a constant heartache to poor Rob. The next morning, we got up and went to a nearby town, also on the water, on the English Channel, and discovered prehistoric creatures. And then one of my own dinosaurs wandered into the photo. After we explored a little bit around the beach area there, we walked down along the coast, and you can see how high the coastline is, particularly in this picture. That staircase is much higher than you'd expect. It doesn't fall gently to the sea. The sea just is all of a sudden there. Over my shoulder there, you can see these sort of dark cliffs, which are of a very dense clay. And what the picture can't capture is how shiny and slick they looked in the sun. We found ourselves a Moroccan restaurant. Rob had a tagine and ate his very, very first cooked olive, and he didn't even spit it out. back to Honfleur and went for a walk in the garden that is a large public garden. It was at the end of the city as it reaches the English Channel, and there's a large pond there with water lilies in honor of Claude Monet, who painted here. Go a little farther down past that park and you are on the tidal flats. The water, when it is in, makes this whole area absolutely impassable, but once it subsides, you can do some pretty good rock scavenging down there. It's a wonderful park. And then back into town for a last wander around before we get up early in the next morning to set off on the next leg of our trip, which is from Honfleur to the town of Auray. Time to get back on the road, and we made our way to Auray by the mid-afternoon. It's an old town with basically two city centers. Our hotel was in the upper part of the city. There's another section on the other side of the river. Our hotel looked out across the main square, the upper part of the town. You can see the church tower there, and there's a much better picture of it. We enjoyed wandering around in search of a restaurant. So we made our way down the hill, got down to the harbor area, had to cross a small bridge across the river to get there. And it's all cafes. We sat down, had a couple of beers. No one was serving dinner yet. It was still a little bit too early. And so we just sat there and watched people wandering around the harbor, watched the boats coming in and out, and then got up and decided to make our way back up the hill. So there we were, going back across the bridge again, and we decided not to take the street path back up, but to use this path we saw on the other side of the river. And yeah, a little bit on the steep side, but once you climb all the way up it, the views are going to be fantastic, right? So that's what we decided to do. Climbed up, and when we got to the top, or as we were climbing even, it turned out that yes, the view is just stunning. Such a pretty little town, and just in so many ways reminds me of the historic district in Annapolis there on the water, all those cafes. Got to the top, stopped, sat down, caught our breath, and then made our way back in the direction of our hotel, hoping to find a restaurant close by, mostly because we didn't think we could eat a big dinner and then make it back up that dang hill. We found a great restaurant. We wound up eating there every night we were in Auray. The food was fantastic. Had the best smoked salmon of my life. Beautifully prepared, beautifully presented, beautifully priced. This is a mostly cheese dish. You can see why I'm smiling. And the desserts, well, kind of hard to describe how good those desserts were. Wonderful place. Cafe Latte, downtown Auray. I can definitely recommend it. This is not the only structure on the site. There's also a large gallery of raised stones that were probably once roofed over, turfed over. But the dolmen itself is underground, dug into the ground, walled with enormous stones and roofed with even bigger ones. And once you get inside, you can see that the stones on the interior have been carved in patterns that are sometimes very spiral, repetition of spiral figures, other times more rectilinear figures. The symbology obviously is the meaning is lost to us. But it is just so marvelous to stand there and look at these works of art carved so long ago. Then it was time for lunch. We made our way to a small port town on the water, Le Trinité-sur-Mer. Got ourselves a light lunch and again watched the world go by before getting up from our table and going to wander around the docks. Now, I lived in Annapolis for 30 years. I thought I knew what a busy sailboat harbor looked like, and what I was wrong. I was wrong. I have never seen so many boats during the sailboat show. Did a little bit of exploring in the area on our way to Pauillac, stopped and checked out this lovely old church. The detail work was really something on this. And we went back to the same restaurant we'd eaten at in Pauillac on our previous visit. And as on our previous visit, we went with seafood. Rob, of course, ordered mussels. I went for something a little bit more exotic. I had coquille Saint-Jacques, scallops with langoustines. On our way out of Bordeaux and back across the Garonne and on our way to our next stop, which will be Saumur. Rob and I got off the road and did a little exploring when we needed to stretch our legs, and we discovered this wonderful old ruined basilica, pieces scattered around a parking lot. What really got me was that when the old basilica burned, they just roofed over a little bit of what remained and built it inside the outside of the old basilica. Wandered around a bit, looking for a place to have lunch, and came across the old horloge. It was where they announced curfew, called their citizens to fight fires or repel invaders. We had a wonderful lunch. I ordered what I thought was beef and wound up with one of the loveliest pieces of pork I've ever eaten in my life. We strolled around a bit to walk that off and came across another church where the restoration effort had basically been an attempt to show people what it would have looked like and to restore sections of the stonework as a contrast to the faded stonework that has been left in place. Enjoyed walking up and down these streets, particularly these half-timbered buildings, and we got to the top of this hill and discovered that a mama cat had found a spot with her kitten and had an admirer.